This one mindset shift is the difference between an average troubleshooter and a great one. When I was learning to program, I loved to build things from scratch. I used to figure out how something worked and then try to build one from just the tools I had. I wanted to learn 3D, so I wrote a renderer that ran at a whopping 1 frame per 10 minutes using software ray tracing. I dug through the code that I could get my hands on and I learned assembly. My first collision simulation application used a lot of trigonometry. This was the only tool that I had at the time, and when I finally learned vector algebra at university, I realized how foolish I'd been and how expensive the calculations I'd used were. At the time, I was learning for fun, but that helped me to get an insight into what was going on the inside of applications. You must have noticed that most programmers love using libraries. A library is a great way to get some working functionality into your application, and it's quick. But one thing that you miss out on is what's on the inside of the library. You see, most software is made of layers, and some of those layers, like the inside of an onion, are hidden from us. If you're using a library without having the source code available to you, you'll have to build your own mental representation of how that library works, essentially guessing. This is where troubleshooting comes in. If you think of a program as being like an iceberg, with parts that are visible to you and parts that are hidden, then realistically, you don't really know what's below the surface. When you have a bug, what's really happening is that your mental representation of what the program does is different from the actual program. Debugging and troubleshooting is the process of correcting your mental model of how the program actually behaves to gain greater insight into how to change it so it behaves how it's specified. This requires a mindset shift. You need to go from a place where you know how the program is meant to behave and how the logic should be laid out to how the program is actually working, and at that point you can start to work through what's really happening. You need to stop looking above the waterline and start imagining what's below the waterline, and to do that you need to get curious and creative. Now, some of the details of what's below might be accessible to you. It might be in the source code that your organization owns or maintains. It might belong to another team. You might have licensed the source code from another organization, or you might genuinely have to guess or reverse engineer what the software in those inaccessible layers are actually doing. The technique that I like to use is to pretend as though I was going to implement the system that behaves in this erroneous way that you're seeing. In other words, how would I implement this bug? Then all you need to do is to find a way of challenging or confirming that new mental model, and if you're lucky, there's code you have access to which you can change to correct it. So, peek below the water, ask how would I implement this bug, challenge or confirm your new mental model, gain a more thorough understanding of the dynamics of the system, and then fix the bug given your new understanding. And like or comment if you found this helpful.